We're back. You are chatting with John P. Today we are going to be talking about the Ming 1709 Massena Lab recent watch release and the problems that are coming or reportedly coming with this watch. Yes, watch enthusiasts are all over the forums and Instagram and YouTube and all of the other places that we like to kind of congregate and talk about watches. And enthusiasts that have this watch are upset because of an issue with alignment of the hands, apparently a widespread issue. Now, I'm going to be talking later in this video about the mechanics of why this is, and if you are Ming, from Ming, or if you're from the brand Ming, and you're jumping to conclusions, please watch the entirety of this video because I'm going to be sharing with you history about similar watches and why maybe this is just kind of something that comes with the territory of trying to pull off this particular type of complication. I'll be talking about this a little bit more in depth, but first, on my wrist today, I have a very awesome Seiko limited release collaboration with Rowing Blazers and Eric Wind from Wind Vintage. He helped to design this with his friend over at Rowing Blazers, Jack, I believe his name is, and this is the Rally Diver, kind of a reimagination of the original Seiko Rally Diver, and a pretty cool story about how this came to be. You can see a lot more on Rowing Blazers' website and your other favorite watch sites. So guys, what is Ming? I think it's very important, before we jump into the problem here, it's very important for us to kind of just summarize what Ming as a brand is. Many of you already know this, but very simply put, and this will make a lot of sense, and this is something that I'll drive home later in the video, and it'll really help to kind of gear, pun intended, our perspective on the issue here with these watches, is this is a watch brand for watch enthusiasts by a designer. A watch brand for enthusiasts. That's the key word here. Now, let's say this particular release, once again, before we jump into all the nitty-gritty of the issues and problems here, because I've got a lot of interesting evidence to share with you, this is a limited release, the 1709 with Massena Lab. Massena is another company that's out there doing a lot of collaborations with companies like Habring. They've now developed their own line of kind of micro brand watches. But what they did is a collaboration, 200 pieces in total, 150 in black and 50 pieces in this honey. My initial impressions, by the way, is I really like the design. It's very cool. It's unique. It's in line with the Ming brand. That kind of almost futuristic avant-garde styling on a simple time-only watch. Price point, $2,500 to $2,600. I think it depends on your conversion rate, where you bought the watch, but this was a limited release. And when Ming came out with this, they also acknowledged that there's kind of some flipping in the community. Something similar happened with Kurono, the Tokyo line, if you're familiar with the Hajime Asaoka. I recently also did a video about that, but Ming did this limited release with Massena, and they had some type of waiting period where you would sign up, and apparently the website crashed. They blamed it on, maybe denial of service or hackers or something like that. The facts are neither here nor there. Nonetheless, maybe the release didn't go as they planned, but the watches eventually delivered, and people received the watches, and there was a lot of really great press because the design is overwhelmingly received as cool. It has an interesting cool factor, and at this price point, I think it can be safely said that many people do agree that it's some of the best design you can get at this price point. And we've had them at the door at Del Rey Watch, by the way. Not this release, but other Mings, and I would have to agree. Very cool, interesting style watch that you might not find at this price point. But, oh, and by the way, I do have some notes here on my laptop because I want to make sure we get the facts straight. I don't misrepresent anything, and also I need to give credit to some people who have sent me some of this evidence. Keep in mind, Ming is a young brand. We don't want to necessarily tarnish their reputation, which is why I'm going to be giving it a little bit more of a technical look at the end of the video. So what is the issue? What is the issue everyone is up in arms about? Here's the thing. The hands do not align on the watch. There are many pictures and videos on Instagram of the hands just simply not aligning. Now, before we show you the pictures and the videos, I want to kind of give credit to an Instagram user, Mazawell, who kind of tipped me up to this at first. Others have sent messages, but I want to thank them, as well as Arab Watch Guide for one of the photos here, and Horo Mario Bro on Instagram, who apparently supplied the videos and the pictures, which I will be showing. If I did miss any credits, I want to make sure to give credit where credit is due, and also not misrepresent and make this appear more widespread than it actually is. So if any of these pictures or videos are yours, I will give you credit. Just send a message, but you can see their credit in the description below. So the first, let's take a look at this picture. You can clearly see that the hour and the minute hands just don't align in this photograph. They don't align. Now, one could say maybe this is just something that, they kind of tricked the movement, or they kind of forced it in this position. Maybe this is a one-off, but let's take a look at this actual video of the watch being used. And this was provided by apparently Oro Mario Bro, but once again, please reach out if this is your video and I'll give you credit. You can see here in the videos of the watch actually being used, and it just does not align. The hands do not align. You can see it in this video, as well as an additional short clip. Now, many are up in arms about this because there are other people kind of chiming in as well on the forums, Instagram, you name it, saying that they are also experiencing this problem. Some of the kind of meme accounts are going back and forth online, showing this and other photos, and people kind of congregating around this issue and complaining. Now, once again, let's circle back to what I said at the beginning of this video. What is Ming? Ming is a brand for enthusiasts. When you get into micro brands are for enthusiasts. They're not on the shelves at stores. They have to be bought online. You have to seek out the brand. You have to know what you want. Very rarely are these casual buys. These are buys from enthusiasts. And as we know, as many of us are enthusiasts, myself included, we care about the subtleties and the details. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to this and why this is the way it is and why this movement works, how it does, and whether or not Ming can do anything about it. But I want to share with you, and I want to read it out, and I have I was provided this email from Ming customer support and what they tell you if you have this issue. And I want to read it. They tell you that the 1709 is equipped with a modified version of the SW330-2. Now, this is a Salida movement. This is a Salida movement with a second time zone or a GMT where that hand is adjustable manually on its own. Now, back to what they say, where the hour hand can be set independently in 1 hour jumps. As this hand needs to crawl during normal operation or time setting in the third crown position and jump during setting in the second crown position, there's a small amount of slack built into the system. This slack can usually manifest itself as a small misalignment immediately after the hour hand is set independently. However, if the watch is left to run, the slack should be taken up within 60 minutes and the hand should be aligned again. Now, that's what Ming customer service is telling you if you do experience this problem. They go on to say they recommend winding the watch, and I'm going to summarize this because they give you a very drawn-out explanation, basically saying you shouldn't wiggle with the crown, you shouldn't move it around, you should not go out of your way to kind of force that hand to be misaligned, right? Because that's kind of what they're telling you in this second email in so many words in a roundabout way. Now, let's think about this. Wait a second. Why would this operate like this? This watch is an hour and minute hand only watch. This time only, even without the running seconds. Certainly not a GMT hand, and that's what they're giving you. They're telling you, this watch, looking directly at the specs from the Ming website, it has a movement of a 330-M1 automatic based on the Salida SW330-2 by Schwartz ETN. So, taking what they said and also just looking at the movement and the watch, what they're doing is they're taking this Salida movement, this movement that's used in so many other micro brands, by the way, not only micro brands, but some larger brands. Usually they use the SW200 because it's not including the second time zone hand. But, perhaps Schwartz ETN worked on a little bit, retrofit something, at least the rotor was engraved by them. And basically what Ming did here is they took a GMT movement and they took the GMT hand and made it your hour hand so that you could adjust the hour hand independently. And that's why we're experiencing, not necessarily me, but I mean like those that own the watch. I do not own this watch. That's why you're experiencing this issue, is because when you consider the GMT hand on a watch, it's a little bit fluid, right? It's not going to necessarily make the jumps, and you can force that GMT hand to not be aligned with the other hour hand just because of the way that the gearing and the tooling works on this and how that hand has to move, especially when you're moving the time zone on your current time zone. That hand has to jump between to catch up. And so when you see the video, if you go back and look, it does jump in between and it doesn't align, and there is slack in play. So why is this happening? Well, quite honestly, this is happening because of the way this movement is designed. I will say that it's an interesting choice for a watch movement. In my mind, there's one of two things that Ming was thinking when they did this. One, they either got an amazing deal on these movements because perhaps Sellita made a lot, and they were like, "Hey, we'll give you a little bit better price on this hand, this GMT hand movement compared to the SW200 or something like that." Even though it's a little bit more complicated, I get it. Maybe there were extras, so they got a really great deal, and they were putting in some cost-cutting savings. Or it's also very possible that Ming, being, once again, a brand for enthusiasts, they wanted to deliver something cool and quirky that maybe people would find interesting, maybe not totally usable, and using as much driving as much utility value out of that hour hand, being able to change it independently. Maybe not totally usable, but interestingly enough, provided so that you can think it's cool and wow, like Ming actually did something for us. Or maybe it's a combination of the both. Maybe they got a better price on the movements, or maybe it's not. Maybe they just, it was just something they wanted to have. I don't know. There hasn't really been a formal statement why they did this, but that has to be really the only two reasons. Either they were cost cutting and they got a great deal on these movements and just said, hey, well, we don't need, we can't really, let's not deviate away from the Ming brand. Let's keep it, hour and seconds hand and just pop it on there and have Schwartz ETN do it. Schwartz ETN being a movement modifier. And they also manufacture some watches, a small collection. But that's generally what they're doing for brands. They're putting together watches private label. And that's what they did, right? So they took that GMT hand and they made it the hour hand. And because of that, we see this variance, and it's just the mechanics of this movement. Now, Ming is not the only company to have tried this at all. If we look to history, and I don't know if Ming did this, but they probably should have, but this is only something that watchmakers in this era would have known. There were comparable movements, and there still are today in the product catalogs, produced by Etta, and these movements were used in some of the earlier days of Franck Muller. They were used by Vincent Calabrese and some of the other independents and those that wanted to do something quirky. And because we have Hans at Delray Watch at our service center, he actually had the Franck Muller service contract and repaired all of their comebacks, all of their returns in some of the earliest days of Franck Muller. Very common. Hans had his own workshop in North Carolina for a very long time while he was working for some other brands. And so he had that contract, and he would share stories. Hans shared stories of these similar movements that Franck Muller would use, kind of the Etta equivalent of this, and they would just have these issues because of the tooling and the alignment. And it's something that if one of these watches does come through the door, not the Ming, but those that use the movements, Hans would always kind of give us the nod, maybe this is not something we want to stock for a customer, because he knew, as he saw over time, the gears and the systems that run these movements, they wear down, and it increases the slack and the variance even more, and it's much more noticeable, especially when they use that hand for something else besides the GMT hand, right? If we're looking at that time zone hand, the GMT hand, and we want to leave it as a GMT hand, as enthusiasts and collectors, we might not really care about the slack, right? Because it's like, oh, it's the other hand we don't really use as much, and as long as the time works, then I'm completely comfortable with it, because that is the engineering behind this movement. By design, that is how it works, and you give it some time and it can catch up. Or maybe if the movement gets a little bit old and the oils dry up and it gets some friction in there on the gears and the teeth, it wears down and increases the slack and variance. You see it in anything with moving parts, you see it in automobiles, you see it in quite literally anything that has gears, wears away, not as precise. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. And so it's much more noticeable as an issue, I think, for those that bought the watch now, because either, maybe they haven't seen that phenomenon in the past, or more likely the scenario is that it's just very apparent and it's more of an issue when that hand is being used for a critical function of the main timekeeping of the watch, right? Circling back to the original thing that I said, let's keep in mind, is Ming is a brand for enthusiasts. And today, I see it every day. I work with you here at Delray Watch, and so many collectors. We really ask for a lot in a marketplace where there's so much competition, 1,000 micro brands. I say that as a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. Go to Kickstarter, see the micro brands that are coming out. Really, brands are put together against themselves to deliver the best product with the most thoughtful insight in the design of the product. And while Ming certainly did so, in my opinion, with the aesthetics of the watch, and apparently the opinion of so many others out there on the internet, the movement choice just seemed to be either not well thought out or perhaps or malinformed, right? I could easily see the scenario where Schwartz Etienne told Ming and Massena, whoever was working together on the actual creation of the watch, or whether they use another third-party manufacturer to put them together and make the parts, like, hey, use this movement, it'll be an interesting little quirk or something like that. I could see them telling that without maybe not considering the issues that these could have. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will have these issues that are issues, so let me kind of run through that here. This might not be an issue for everyone, is what I'm saying, right? So if you're a contract watch manufacturer, you've made so many movements for so many brands and you've seen this before, this might not really be an issue because, hey, it's the engineering behind the movement. But if you're a collector, an enthusiast, this could be an issue because you just expect everything to align all the time, and maybe you didn't realize what you were getting into, and maybe Ming didn't properly explain up front, while people are knocking on the door, the website's down trying to get this watch, maybe there wasn't any kind of notification to the collector, hey, this movement's going to have slack, it's going to have variance, the hands aren't going to align because this is how we do it, this is why we do it, and that's part of the brand. So do I think that they made a great choice with the movement? No, probably not, considering, once again, brand for enthusiasts, expecting everything to be on point, literally, quite literally, it should align, and I would probably agree. What should Ming do? Now, I think that Ming probably should have just used a Sellita SW200. Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions and go with what I said could have happened and say it's just about price, because how much of a price break could they really have gotten? $20? What are the savings over 200 watches? I don't think that's crazy for them to take that kind of a gamble. I truly think that Ming probably wanted to deliver something cool and quirky to a group of watch collectors and buyers that really tend to favor that type of thing historically. I mean, that's what got Ming going in the first place, that cool and quirky design. They tried to do something cool and quirky here, it didn't work out. So if I was Ming, what I would probably do is try to put SW200 movements or comparable into the watches. Now, hopefully the hands can fit on top and hopefully everything else works, but it should probably work the same. Once again, Schwartz Etienne could have modified it. The hands might be a different size, so maybe they don't fit, but if they can, I think that that's a decent solution for Ming, is to kind of backpedal if they do see truly widespread concern about this and everyone is angry. Though I'm not entirely sure. I see some people that are upset about it, but given the way that this works, maybe they could have a bit of a campaign where they explain how it is, the way that it is, offer someone to take the watch back, or perhaps even offer to swap the movements and just deal with it as it is and have, different movements in that model for time goes on. I think that it could be wise for them to do that, considering I don't know how long of a warranty they're offering here, but let's say 10 years down the road. They're not offering a warranty within 10 years. No one does. But 10 years down the road and the gears kind of wore out and you see a lot of people upset with this, especially if they speculate the retail, the secondhand prices go up on these, and the collectors get a little bit upset because maybe the watchmakers that work on them in the future can't really repair them. I have to say, some of the Frank Muellers that use similar architecture, as well as some of the other more unnotable independents from kind of that era, the early 2000s, late 1990s, 1999, 2000 era, that use comparable architecture. When we get those in the door now, 20 years later, sometimes there's really nothing that can be done. I mean, new parts have to be ordered, and even then, there can be a little bit of slack. And so that's why, typically we don't stock anything at Del Rey with similar architecture. But I don't know if that's something Ming wants to do. Once again, other brands do use this movement. Steinhardt, Laco, Mito, Christopher Ward, so on, but they don't do it in this way. So the movements are out there, the parts are out there, but different way that it was used with Ming. So what do you guys think about this? Do you think, first of all, I think it's safe to say, looking in a vacuum, a watch's hands should align, right? That is part of a watch. Timekeeping, why not be precise with it? In fact, let's be precise with it. But given the architecture, given how the movement works, given that there's slack built in, this is something that is real. What should Ming do, in your opinion? Should they replace it with an SW200 or something that doesn't have this, and let's just say, hey, let's just not do anything fancy, let's backpedal, let's get a solid product out there? Should they recall the watches? Should they have a campaign where maybe they let people know that this is how it works, widespread if you bought the watch? Or should they do something completely different? I'm thinking in my head, wow, what should they do here? What can they actually do? What are the costs behind this? Limited production run, but then again, a brand for enthusiasts. What do the enthusiasts want? If Ming can see this, they can look right in the comments below and they can decide what to do. And once again, I don't want to be too hard on the brand, because this easily could have been a slip up and just not enough history was baked into the brand, or maybe there weren't enough senior level watchmakers that have seen something like this before. Or maybe Schwartz ETN, misled them, or they had, a contract account manager that also lacked that long-term history and experience working on similar architecture to know that this would happen and people would be upset. I don't know, guys. Leave in the comments below. I'm super curious to hear your opinion, because micro brands are interesting. I want to see how this plays out. Comments below. Please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And once again, thanks again to Mazawell, Arab Watch Guide, and Oro Mario Bro for supplying all of this information and pictures and videos. And your credits will be in the description below. Anyways, guys, I have to get back to work. Thanks for watching. You have been chatting with John P. Ciao.